There it is, the famous dead man's hand, the cards I was holding when that coward Jack McCall shot me from behind in the middle of a poker game, shot me dead. Folks been talking about me ever since, and when they talk about me, they're talking about the Wild West you 21st century folks know, or think you know. They called me Wild Bill Hickok, even though my first name warn't Bill. James Butler Hickok, that was my real name. During my younger days, I was a soldier, scout, buffalo hunter, constable, marshal, and sheriff. It was 1865 when an Easterner heard about my exploits and came around wanting to write about me. He wrote a story for Harper's New Monthly, claiming I'd killed hundreds of men. Now, I might have let that little exaggeration slip out myself. Truth to tell, I don't guess I killed more than 20 men during all my days, but that story made me famous, and so the legend got started. Another Eastern fella named Ned Buntline wrote books called dime novels, all full of the craziest adventures. He came looking for me in Nebraska, fixing to write one of his novels about me. Found me in a saloon, started yelling, "There's my man, I want you!" I didn't like his tone, so I told him to get out of town or I'd shoot him. That wasn't my smartest move. Ned looked up an old pal of mine, William Cody, better known as Buffalo Bill on account of the thousands of bison he'd killed working for the Kansas Pacific Railroad. He'd had his share of real adventures, rode for the Pony Express when he was just a kid, fought more than his share of Indians, and guided Easterners and foreigners on delicately staged buffalo hunts. So Ned wrote up a batch of stories about him called Buffalo Bill, the King of the Bordermen. They sold more than 1 million copies and made both Ned and Bill famous. Pretty soon, Ned wrote a play about Buffalo Bill called Scouts of the Prairie. It premiered in Chicago in 1872 with Bill playing himself on stage. The play was the most ridiculous yarn you can imagine. Ned said he wrote it in 4 hours, and critics wondered why it took him so long. Bill weren't much of an actor either, but audiences didn't care. They just loved the play, and Bill Cody too. Ned wrote another play called Scouts of the Plains. I was a character in it, and Bill and Ned talked me into playing myself. Now, I didn't much like folks staring at me, which is kind of a liability when you're acting on stage. One night, a certain spotlight seemed to be shining on me too particular, so I shot it out. The rest of that performance was a little on the dark side. I didn't stick to acting too long. For that matter, I didn't stick to living too long. 1876, that was the year I got myself killed. But the show must go on, as they say. And I like to think I went on with it somehow. In 1883, Buffalo Bill premiered his famous Wild West, and it was huge and grand, an outdoor spectacle with a cast of hundreds and more animals than you could shake a fist at, elk, cattle, and a whole herd of buffalo. Oh, and horses too, and the finest riders in the world. That show toured the whole United States, and also to London and throughout all Europe, performing for the likes of Queen Victoria herself. Its biggest stars included a slip of a woman named Annie Oakley. Little Sure Shot, folks called her. She could shoot better than even me. And there were lots of Indians with the show too, including the great Sioux chief Sitting Bull. The Indians reenacted Custer's last stand and performed an attack on the Deadwood stage. Bill Cody kept his show going till he died in 1917. Meanwhile, along came this newfangled hand-cranked camera for making moving pictures. Then came hundreds of picture shows about the Wild West. For a whole century now, Them shows have been feeding you a crazy parcel of truths and legends and bold-faced lies. And I ought to know. I helped make 'em up.